The mysterious SOS. In the endless void of space, the human exploration ship Aurora moved silently. Captain Mira Jones stood on the bridge, staring out into the darkness. The crew of 30 was on a routine mission to explore uncharted regions of space. They had seen nothing unusual for weeks, just stars and silence. Then it happened. "Captain, we're picking up a signal," shouted Ensign Reed, the ship's communications officer. His voice trembled with a mix of excitement and fear. It's not human." Mira walked over quickly. "Play it." A strange sound filled the room, crackling and broken, but with a sense of urgency. It wasn't words exactly, but the emotion in the signal was clear. Someone, or something, was asking for help. The crew exchanged nervous glances. "Where is it coming from?" Mira asked. "Approximately 2 light-years away," replied Lieutenant Carter, the navigator. "But Captain, the signal is weak. If we delay, we might lose it." Mira considered her options. This region of space was uncharted, and unknown dangers could be lurking. But she couldn't ignore the signal. "Set a course," she ordered. "Let's find out who, or what, needs our help." Hours later, the Aurora approached the source of the signal. The view on the main screen made everyone hold their breath. A massive alien fleet floated in the darkness, silent and lifeless. The ships were sleek and metallic, unlike anything humans had ever seen. There were dozens of them, each the size of a small city, but none showed any signs of power or activity. "It's like a graveyard," whispered Reed. "Any life signs?" Mira asked. "Scanning now," replied Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's chief scientist. She frowned at her console. "There are faint readings, but they're weak. It's hard to say if anyone is alive." The silence was heavy. Mira could feel the tension in the air. "What's your call, Captain?" asked Carter. "This could be dangerous. We don't know who they are or what happened to them." Mira looked at the screen. These ships weren't just drifting. They had been abandoned. Whatever happened to the aliens might still be a threat, but she couldn't just turn away. "We're sending a team to investigate," she said firmly. "If there are survivors, we'll help them." A small shuttle left the Aurora, carrying Mira, Dr. Vasquez, and 3 security officers. As they approached the nearest alien ship, the sheer size of it was overwhelming. Its hull was scarred with deep gashes, as if it had been attacked by something powerful. The shuttle docked, and the team stepped into the alien ship. The air was cold and thin, and the lights were completely out. Flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing long corridors made of strange, smooth metal. "It's like a ghost ship," muttered Officer Grant, gripping his weapon tightly. The team moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly. Dr. Vasquez paused to examine them. "This language is unlike anything we've encountered," she said, "but it looks like they were trying to warn us about something." "Warn us about what?" Mira asked, but Vasquez shook her head. They pressed on, following the faint life signs detected earlier. Finally, they entered a large chamber filled with pods. Each pod contained a figure, tall, slender beings with pale, translucent skin and large, dark eyes. Most of them were motionless, but one pod had a faint glow. "This one's alive," said Vasquez, kneeling beside it, "but barely." Mira touched the pod. The alien inside looked fragile, its chest rising and falling weakly. She nodded to Vasquez. "Can we wake it?" "I'll try, but we don't know how their systems work," Vasquez replied, pulling out a portable power unit. She connected it to the pod and began transferring energy. The glow grew brighter, and suddenly the alien's eyes opened. The creature gasped, sitting up in panic. Its eyes darted around, filled with fear. "Easy," Mira said, raising her hands. "We're here to help." The alien looked at her, trembling. It spoke, but the words were strange and unrecognizable. Vasquez activated the universal translator, which struggled for a moment before spitting out a single word. Danger. The team froze. What kind of danger? Mira asked, trying to stay calm. The alien looked at her, then pointed upwards with a shaking hand. At that moment, the ship shuddered. The team looked at each other in alarm. Captain, the Aurora is detecting a power surge, came Reed's voice over the comm. Something's happening out there. Mira grabbed her communicator. What kind of surge? It's coming from the alien fleet, Reed replied, his voice tense. But there's another signal too. Something is heading our way. The alien began speaking again, faster this time. The translator caught a few more words. Hunters. Coming. Death. Mira's heart raced. We're getting out of here. The team hurried back to the shuttle, carrying the alien with them. As they lifted off, the ship shook again, and a low, ominous hum filled the air. Outside, the stars seemed to ripple as something massive began to emerge from the darkness. The Aurora's sensors lit up with warnings. Whatever was coming, it wasn't friendly. The silent fleet. The shuttle docked back onto the Aurora in a rush. Alarms were blaring, and tension filled the air as Captain Mira Jones stepped onto the bridge. The rescued alien was barely conscious, trembling and clutching at its chest as it muttered strange words. The universal translator struggled to keep up, spitting out fragments. They come. No escape. Destroy us all. Report. Mira barked, her eyes darting to the main screen. Lieutenant Carter turned from his console, his face pale. Captain, something massive is heading our way. It's cloaked, but it's big. Sensors are struggling to track it. The alien, Kale, as they later learned his name, grabbed Mira's arm with surprising strength. His large, dark eyes locked onto hers, desperation clear in his expression. The translator finally settled on a phrase. Leave now. Save yourselves. But leaving wasn't an option. Not yet. Mira ordered the Aurora to retreat to a safer distance, just beyond the edge of the alien fleet. From there, they analyzed the ships. Most of the fleet was dead. No power, no movement, and minimal life signs. It was a graveyard of technology far more advanced than anything humans had ever seen. Yet, among the silence, faint energy readings flickered deep within the flagship, like a heartbeat. Captain, Dr. Elena Vasquez said, reviewing the scans, the flagship's core still has power. If we can restore it, it might give us answers, or even a way to defend ourselves. Mira nodded, her mind racing. Do it. Reed, try to stabilize our guest. We need him conscious. Kel's breathing was shallow, but his translator began to pick up more as he murmured weakly. The Eaters, they crippled us. They will finish what they started. The Eaters? Mira repeated, her stomach twisting at the ominous name. A team of engineers, led by Vasquez, boarded the alien flagship. It was larger and darker than the previous ship, with corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly. Strange machinery lined the walls, and the air was thick with an unplaceable tension, as if the ship itself were holding its breath. Keep moving, Vasquez instructed, her voice steady, but her grip tight on her equipment. The core should be just ahead. As they entered the central chamber, they found the core, a massive, glowing sphere pulsating faintly. Around it were rows of alien consoles, many damaged, some completely destroyed. One console, however, still flickered with life. Vasquez rushed to it, connecting her portable interface. This technology is leagues beyond us, she muttered, awe mixing with frustration. But I might be able to. A loud clang echoed through the chamber, cutting her off. The team froze, their flashlights swinging toward the sound. In the shadows, something moved. Did anyone else see that? Whispered one of the engineers. Before anyone could respond, the sound came again, closer this time. The faint blue glow of the core cast long, shifting shadows. Vasquez's hand hovered over her communicator. Mira, she whispered, we're not alone in here. Back on the Aurora, Mira's attention was split between Vasquez's team and the growing threat outside. The mysterious cloaked object was closing in, and now its shape was beginning to reveal itself. A fleet of jagged black ships, their designs organic and predatory. Kale, still weak but now awake, stared at the screen and shuddered. "Eaters," he said, his voice trembling. "They destroy. Consume all. Your ship. No match." "What do they want?" Mira demanded. Kale looked at her with a mix of pity and fear. "Not want. Only destroy." Suddenly, the Aurora's comm crackled. "Captain," Vasquez's voice came through, urgent and strained. "We've restored partial power to the flagship, but there's something else here." "What do you mean, something else?" Mira asked, her voice sharp. "They're drones," Vasquez said. "Automated defense systems, but they're hostile. They must think we're intruders." Gunfire and shouts echoed over the comm before the signal cut off. Mira's mind raced. If the flagship's automated defenses were active, it meant the ship still had some form of intelligence running its systems. But if the Eaters attacked now, the entire fleet, including the Aurora, would be wiped out. "Kale," she said, turning to the alien, "how do we stop the Eaters?" Kale hesitated, then spoke slowly. "The flagship has a weapon. Hidden. But it cannot fire. Systems are broken. You must fix." "And what happens if we do?" Mira pressed. Cal's gaze was grim. "One chance. Destroy them." On the alien flagship, Vasquez's team fought to stay alive. The defense drones were relentless, mechanical creatures with spindly limbs and glowing red eyes. The engineers worked desperately, bypassing alien code and restoring power to the weapon Cal mentioned. "This is insane," one engineer shouted as a drone lunged toward him, only to be shot down by Vasquez. "We don't have a choice," Vasquez replied, her hands flying over the controls. "If we don't power up this ship, we're all dead." Finally, the core flared brighter, and the drones froze mid-attack. A low hum filled the chamber as the flagship seemed to awaken. On the Aurora, the fleet's readings spiked. "Captain," Reed exclaimed, "the flagship is powering up. Its systems are responding to us." Mira's relief was short-lived as the Black Eater ships came into full view on the screen. Their jagged forms gleamed menacingly, and a single message echoed through the Aurora's speakers, deep and guttural. "Prepare to be consumed. Race against time." The bridge of the Aurora buzzed with frantic energy as the Eater fleet loomed closer. Their jagged, nightmarish ships moved like predatory animals through the dark. Each moment brought them nearer, their intent clear: destruction. Captain Mira Jones stood at the center of the chaos, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "How long until they're within firing range?" she asked. Lieutenant Carter's face was pale as he scanned his console. 5 minutes, maybe less." Mira turned to Reed. "Status on the flagship." Reed's hands trembled as he tapped furiously at his screen. "Partial power is online, but weapons are still inactive. Vasquez's team is working, but it's going to take time." Time was a luxury they didn't have. On the flagship, deep within the flagship, Dr. Vasquez's team raced to bring the ship's systems back online. The core now pulsed steadily, casting an eerie blue glow over the chamber. Sparks flew as engineers worked frantically, bypassing damaged circuits and deciphering alien interfaces. Vasquez's communicator crackled to life. "Doctor," Mira's voice came through, calm but urgent. "The Eaters are closing in. We need that weapon now." "I know, Captain," Vasquez replied, sweat dripping down her face. "But this ship is a puzzle, and we're running out of time to solve it." Kale, still weak but determined, stood beside her. He pointed to a glowing console. "There, weapon controls. But needs power. More power." "We've already rerouted everything we can," one of the engineers protested. Kale shook his head. "Not enough. Humans, your ship must help. Vasquez hesitated. Tapping into the Aurora's power reserves would leave it defenseless. But it might be their only chance. On the Aurora, Mira listened as Vasquez explained the situation. Around her, the crew waited tensely, the reality of their situation sinking in. If we transfer power, we'll lose our shields, Carter warned. The Aurora will be a sitting duck. Mira's mind raced. Could they risk everything on a gamble to activate an alien weapon they didn't fully understand? The alternative was no better. Facing the Eaters with their current defenses was suicide. Do it, she ordered. Reed, start the transfer. And tell Vasquez she'd better make it count. As Reed began rerouting the ship's energy, the Aurora's lights dimmed and warning alarms blared. Mira's stomach churned, but she kept her voice steady. Everyone, hold position. No one panics on my watch. The Eater fleet. The Eater ships moved closer, their grotesque forms now fully visible. They were unlike any spacecraft Mira had ever seen, organic and machine fused together, pulsating with a sickly green light. Tendrils extended from their hulls, twitching as if alive. Reed's console beeped. They're scanning us, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Cale, now back on the Aurora bridge, winced as the translator clicked on. They are tasting you, deciding how to consume. A shiver ran through the crew, but Mira's voice cut through the fear. They'll have to get through me first. Back on the flagship, Vasquez's team had done it. With the extra power from the Aurora, the weapons systems roared to life. The alien consoles flared with light, and a massive structure unfolded from the flagship's hull, a glowing cannon, unlike any weapon humans had ever seen. We've got it online. Vasquez called into her communicator. But there's a problem. Of course there is, Mira muttered under her breath. What now? The weapon is locked, Vasquez explained. It requires a manual override from someone on board the flagship. Silence filled the bridge as the weight of her words sank in. Mira didn't hesitate. I'm on my way. Captain, you can't. Carter began, but Mira cut him off. They'll need me to authorize the override, she said firmly. Carter, you have the bridge. Cale stepped forward, his voice weak but resolute. I will go. Mira shook her head. You can't even stand properly. Besides, I don't trust anyone else to finish this. Cale hesitated, then nodded. Then, I guide you. I come too. The countdown begins. Mira and Cale boarded a shuttle and raced to the flagship. The Aurora hung in the distance, its shields flickering as it continued to transfer power. The Eaters were now within range, their ships forming a loose circle around the human vessel and the alien fleet. Captain, we can't hold them off much longer. Carter's voice crackled through the comm. Just hold the line, Mira replied. We're almost there. As the shuttle docked, the flagship shuddered. The Eaters had begun their attack. Explosions rocked the alien fleet as the monstrous ships tore through the lifeless vessels like predators feasting on prey. Inside the flagship, Mira and Cale sprinted toward the weapon's core. The hulls shook with each impact, but Cale guided her with surprising precision. Finally, they'd reached the control room. The console glowed faintly, waiting. Cale began typing rapidly, his alien hands flying over the keys. Symbols filled the screen, incomprehensible to Mira, but clearly familiar to Cale. Hurry, she urged. Cale glanced at her. One problem. This weapon. It will take all energy. Flagship will die. Maybe us too. Mira stared at him, then nodded. If that's the price, so be it. We stop them here. Cale pressed the final sequence, and the weapon roared to life. Outside, the flagship's glowing cannon swiveled, locking onto the largest Eater ship. Target locked, Cale said. But they know. They come for us. Mira looked at the screen, where smaller Eater ships broke off from the main fleet, heading straight for the flagship. "Then we hold them off long enough to fire," she said grimly. "No matter what it takes." Betrayal in the ranks. The flagship's weapon hummed with energy, its glowing core illuminating the dark control room like a heartbeat. Captain Mira Jones and Cale stood side by side, watching the targeting system lock onto the largest eater vessel. Outside, the monstrous ships swarmed like predators sensing blood. But the Aurora wasn't silent. Its crew was struggling to keep the eaters at bay while Mira and Cale prepared the weapon. Yet, hidden in the chaos, not everyone aboard was working for the same goal. The rift among the crew. Back on the Aurora, tensions were boiling over. Lieutenant Carter was struggling to maintain order as the ship's shields flickered and the hull groaned under enemy fire. Despite their best efforts, it was clear the Aurora wasn't built for this level of combat. In the mess hall-turned-emergency command center, Ensign Harris, a loud and confrontational officer, rallied a group of dissenters. "This mission is suicide," Harris shouted, slamming his hand on a table. "We're risking everything to save these aliens. And for what? We don't even know if this weapon will work." "We're following the captain's orders," barked Chief Engineer O'Malley, standing firm against him. "She hasn't let us down before, and she's not about to start now." Harris sneered. "She's not here, is she? She's off risking our power supply to save some alien who probably brought this on themselves. Meanwhile, we're sitting ducks. We need to cut the power transfer and get out of here before it's too late." A few crew members murmured in agreement, fear clouding their judgment. O'Malley stepped forward. "The moment we cut the power, that flagship weapon is useless. You're dooming us all. Better a fighting chance than waiting to be slaughtered." Harris snapped, grabbing a weapon from a nearby rack. "Anyone with me? Let's take back this ship." Sabotage on the Aurora. As Harris and his followers stormed toward the engineering deck, Carter received the report. His face darkened as he slammed his fist on the console. "Damn it, we don't have time for this." Turning to Reed, he ordered, "Lock down engineering. No one gets in or out until the captain's mission is complete." But it was too late. Harris had already reached the control hub, his group overwhelming the few engineers guarding the power transfer systems. "This stops now," Harris said, aiming his weapon at the main console. "Cut the transfer." One of the engineers, a young woman named Peril, stepped in front of the console, her hands raised. "If you cut it, the eaters win. Is that what you want?" Harris hesitated for a moment, but his fear overtook him. "Better them than us." Before he could pull the trigger, a loud bang echoed through the room. Harris staggered, clutching his side as O'Malley stepped out from the shadows, a smoking pistol in hand. "Not on my watch." The remaining mutineers surrendered quickly, but the damage was done. In the chaos, one of Harris's men had managed to disrupt the power flow. Alarms blared as the Aurora's systems flickered. The eaters close in. On the flagship, Mira and Cale felt the impact immediately. The weapon's core dimmed, its energy levels dropping dangerously low. "What's happening?" Mira demanded, her voice sharp as she activated her communicator. "Captain," Carter's voice came through, strained, "we've had a breach in engineering. Power transfer was interrupted, but we're stabilizing it now." "Stabilize faster," Mira snapped. "We're out of time." Cale turned to her, his expression grim. "The eaters know we are vulnerable. They come to board us." As if on cue, the flagship shuddered violently. Mira checked the external monitors and saw smaller eater ships latching onto the hull, their tendrils drilling into the ship like parasites. "They're trying to take us out from the inside," she muttered. Cale's voice was low. "They do not take. They kill. They leave nothing." Mira gritted her teeth. "Not today." The fight for survival. The eaters' drones poured into the flagship's corridors, spindly, insect-like creatures with razor-sharp limbs and glowing green eyes. Mira and Cale armed themselves with weapons scavenged from the flagship's armory, their team engaging in desperate close-quarters combat. These things are relentless. One of her security officers shouted as a drone lunged, its blade-like appendages cutting through his armor. Mira fired her weapon, the alien energy blast disintegrating the drone in an instant. "Hold the line," she shouted. "We can't let them reach the core." Kale, though weak, fought beside her. His movements were precise, his familiarity with the drone's patterns saving lives. "They focus on destruction, but they are predictable," he said, taking down another drone. Mira nodded, her mind racing. "Then let's use that. Draw them to us while Vasquez finishes powering the weapon." The power restored. Back on the Aurora, O'Malley and Peril worked frantically to restore the disrupted power transfer. Sweat dripped from their faces as alarms blared around them. "Almost there," Peril called out, her fingers flying across the controls. O'Malley grinned as the power level stabilized. "That's it. Full transfer is back online." On the flagship, the core flared to life once more. The weapon's systems roared, the targeting reticle locking onto the Eater mothership. "We're ready to fire." Vasquez's voice came through Mira's communicator. Mira glanced at Cull, who nodded solemnly. "Do it. The betrayer's price." On the Aurora, Carter stood over a wounded Harris in the brig. "You wanted to save yourself, but all you did was make things worse," he said coldly. Harris coughed, wincing in pain. "You'll see. Saving them is a mistake." Carter didn't reply. Instead, he walked away, his focus now on the battle at hand. The final countdown. As the Eater drones broke through the last line of defense, Mira and Kale stood before the control console. Cal's hands hovered over the final sequence. "Once this fires," he said, "the flagship will not survive. Neither will we." Mira's jaw tightened. "Then let's make it count." Kale pressed the final button, and the weapon unleashed its fury. The first strike. The flagship trembled as its weapon unleashed a blinding pulse of energy. The blast surged across the void, striking the largest Eater ship. For a moment, the jagged vessel seemed to shimmer, its grotesque tendrils thrashing violently. Then, in an explosion of green and black light, it disintegrated into debris. The Aurora's bridge erupted in cheers, but Captain Mira Jones had no time to celebrate. "Status report," she barked into her communicator. Lieutenant Carter replied instantly. "Direct hit on the mothership, Captain. It's gone, but the smaller ships are still closing in." Mira's jaw tightened. "Kale, what now? Does the weapon have enough power for another shot?" Kale, standing over the flagship's dimming console, shook his head grimly. "No, the core is drained. Without more power, no more weapon." Mira muttered a curse under her breath. The flagship's weapon had bought them precious time, but the battle was far from over. The Eaters strike back. The destruction of their mothership seemed to enrage the remaining Eater fleet. The smaller ships swarmed toward the flagship and the Aurora, their tendrils slicing through the lifeless alien vessels around them. The Aurora shook violently as one of the Eater ships latched onto it, its organic drills burrowing into the hull. "They're breaching the ship," shouted Reed, his voice panicked. "We've got drones." Carter grabbed his sidearm and barked orders. "Security teams to Deck 3. Contain the breach." On Deck 3, chaos erupted as Eater drones poured in. The spindly, insect-like machines moved with deadly precision, their sharp limbs tearing through bulkheads and crew alike. The ship's corridors became a battleground, with human security forces holding the line against the relentless assault. A desperate defense. Back on the flagship, Mira and Kale worked to stabilize the failing systems. The ship groaned under the strain of the battle, sparks flying from damaged consoles. Kale's movements were sluggish, his injuries taking their toll. "Kale, stay with me," Mira said sharply as she caught him swaying. "We're not done yet." Kale pointed to another console. "This ship still has shields. Old, weak, but could protect Aurora. Need manual activation." Mira's heart sank, and let the flagship go defenseless. Cal's dark eyes met hers. Already defenseless. Without another word, Mira began rerouting power to the shields. The process was slow and grueling, the alien systems refusing to cooperate. Meanwhile, outside, the Eater's relentless assault continued. The first line falls. On the Aurora, Carter led the defense as drones pushed deeper into the ship. The security team fought valiantly, using every weapon at their disposal, but the drones were too many. "We're losing ground," shouted O'Malley as she fired her rifle, barely managing to take down a drone before it lunged at her. Carter grimaced, retreating to a barricade. "We just need to hold a little longer. The captain will come through." "Let's hope so," O'Malley muttered. As the drones advanced, the lights on the Aurora flickered again. The power transfer to the flagship's shields was straining the human ship's systems. The tension was palpable, each crew member silently wondering how much longer they could hold out. Cal's revelation. On the flagship, Cal suddenly stumbled toward a darkened console, his expression changing. He began tapping furiously at the controls, his fingers trembling. "What are you doing?" Mira demanded. Cal didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost broken. "There is one more weapon. Hidden. Dangerous." Mira froze. "What kind of weapon?" Cal's gaze was filled with sorrow. "Self-destruction. It will destroy Eaters. Destroy us too. No escape." Mira felt a chill run down her spine. "Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" Cal hesitated, then said, "Because I hoped it wouldn't come to this." The choice. Mira stood silent for a moment, weighing her options. The Aurora was crippled, its crew fighting for survival. The flagship's weapon was spent, and the Eaters showed no signs of retreating. The self-destruct weapon was their only chance, but it came at the ultimate cost. "Is there any way to escape?" she asked. Cal shook his head. "Not enough time. Explosion. Too powerful." Mira clenched her fists. She had never been one to back down from a fight, but this decision was more than she could bear. "Captain," Carter's voice came through the communicator, loud and strained. "We can't hold them much longer. What's the plan?" Mira took a deep breath, her voice steady. "Hold the line, Lieutenant. I'm working on it." Cal's hands hovered over the console. "Say the word, and I will activate." Mira's mind raced. Could she order the destruction of herself, Cal, and the flagship to save the Aurora and the fleet? Her crew's lives depended on her choice. A glimmer of hope. Before she could respond, the flagship's sensors flared. Cal's eyes widened as he looked at the console. Another signal. Faint, but strong enough. Another fleet. Human. Mira's heart leaped. Human reinforcements. Cal nodded, his expression shifting to hope. Close, but not close enough. If we delay self-destruction, maybe they arrive in time. Mira's communicator buzzed again. "Captain," Carter's voice was desperate. "We're barely holding on here." "Hang tight," Mira said, her voice filled with new determination. "Help is on the way." She turned to Cal. "Keep the self-destruct ready, but stall as long as you can. We're not giving up just yet. The battle continues." As the flagship's shields activated, they absorbed the brunt of the Eater's assault, giving the Aurora a brief reprieve. But the battle was far from over. Mira and Cal worked to buy time, knowing that salvation, or destruction, was just moments away. Outside, the Eaters regrouped, their ships circling like vultures. The humans and their alien allies stood on the brink of annihilation, but for the first time, hope, sacrifice, and redemption. The flagship's shields flickered as the relentless Eater fleet pounded against them. On the bridge of the Aurora, the crew clung to a fragile hope as Carter relayed updates. "Captain," his voice crackled through the comm, "we're holding, but barely. Reinforcements better get here fast." Mira, still aboard the alien flagship, stood beside Kale at the main console. The alien's translucent skin glistened with sweat, his movements slower as exhaustion and pain overtook him. The faint signal of the approaching human fleet was a beacon of hope, but it was still too far away. "Kale, how much time do we have before the shields fail?" Mira asked. Kale scanned the controls. His voice was grim. "Less than 10 minutes. After that, nothing stops them." Mira clenched her fists. The self-destruct weapon loomed as their only surefire solution, but it would destroy both the flagship and the Aurora. Was there another way? Inside the flagship. The battle within the flagship was far from over. Eater drones swarmed the corridors, their razor-sharp limbs cutting down anything in their path. The security officers Mira had brought with her were dwindling, fighting a desperate, losing battle to hold key points. Lieutenant Oren, leading one of the remaining squads, called through Mira's communicator. "Captain, we're losing ground. If those things reach the core." "They won't." Mira cut in, her voice resolute. "Hold them off. I'll figure this out." Oren hesitated, then replied, "We'll hold as long as we can. Just make it count." Mira turned to Kale, who was frantically working at the console. "Can we reroute power from anything else? Life support, non-essential systems?" Kale shook his head. "Already rerouted everything. Ship is at its limit. The Eaters adapt." As if sensing the humans' desperation, the Eater fleet shifted tactics. The smaller ships began pulling back, focusing their fire on the flagship's weakened shields. At the same time, their drones intensified their assault, pouring into the ship's interior with renewed aggression. "They're testing us," Kale said softly. "Hunting us." Mira stared at the screen, watching the Eaters' movements. Their ships were terrifyingly efficient, like a hive working with perfect coordination. It was only a matter of time before the flagship fell. Then the faint human signal grew stronger. Reinforcements were closing in. The arrival of hope. On the Aurora, Reed's console lit up. "Captain, incoming fleet detected. Human ID codes confirmed. It's the Vanguard and her escorts." Cheers erupted on the bridge as the Vanguard, a heavily armed human warship, dropped out of warp, flanked by smaller support vessels. The reinforcements wasted no time, opening fire on the Eaters. Their advanced weapons tore through the smaller Eater ships, forcing them to scatter. Carter activated the comms. "This is Lieutenant Carter of the Aurora. We're pinned down, and the alien flagship is critical to stopping the Eaters. We need immediate support." "Copy that, Aurora," came the voice of Admiral Lin from the Vanguard. "We're engaging now. Hold tight." The final stand. With reinforcements engaging the Eater fleet, Mira and Kale had a moment of reprieve, but it wasn't enough. The flagship's shields were nearly gone, and the drones were dangerously close to breaching the core. "We're out of time," Mira said, looking at Kale. "We need to activate the self-destruct." Kale hesitated, his hands trembling over the controls. "If we do this, you cannot escape." "I cannot escape." "I know," Mira said softly. Her voice carried the weight of 1,000 decisions. "But if we don't, no one survives." Kale looked at her, his dark eyes filled with sorrow. "You are brave, for your kind, for mine." Before they could proceed, the screen flickered. The Vanguard had targeted the largest remaining Eater ship, delivering a devastating barrage that left it crippled. The Eaters' coordinated movements faltered, but their smaller ships still pushed forward. "Admiral Lin, this is Mira." Mira called into the communicator. "The Eater fleet is still too strong. We have a self-destruct weapon on the flagship, but we need time to evacuate." Lin's voice was calm but urgent. "We'll cover you. Do what you need to do. The ultimate sacrifice." Mira and Kale activated the self-destruct sequence, a complex series of commands that Kale input with shaking hands. A deep hum resonated through the ship as the core began to destabilize. "Sequence activated," Kale said. "We have 6 minutes. Mira nodded. Then let's get out of here. As they turned to leave, an explosion rocked the flagship. Mira's communicator crackled with Oren's voice, faint and strained. Captain, drones. Too many. The signal cut off. Mira's heart sank, but she pushed forward, guiding Kale toward the shuttle bay. The corridors were filled with smoke and debris, and the distant screeches of drones echoed closer with every step. When they reached the shuttle, Kale stopped. "What are you doing?" Mira demanded. Kale looked at her, his expression calm despite the chaos around them. "You must go. I stay." "No," Mira said firmly. "We both go, or we both stay." Cal's gaze softened. "My people, they are gone. Yours still fight. You must live. Tell them our story." Before Mira could protest, Kale stepped back, sealing the shuttle door behind her. His voice came through the communicator one last time. "Goodbye, Mira Jones. Save them." The explosion. As Mira's shuttle raced away, the flagship erupted in a massive explosion. The shockwave rippled through space, engulfing the remaining Eater ships in its fiery wake. The Aurora and the human reinforcements barely escaped the blast radius, their crews watching in awe as the light faded. The Eater fleet was gone, their threat eliminated, but the cost was heavy. The aftermath. Back on the Aurora, the crew regrouped, their faces a mix of relief and grief. Mira stood on the bridge, staring out at the debris field where the flagship had once been. Admiral Lynn's voice came through the comm. "Captain Jones, you and your crew showed remarkable courage today. The galaxy owes you a debt." Mira's voice was steady but tinged with sadness. "It wasn't just us. Kale and his people gave everything to stop the Eaters. We owe them our survival." As the fleet prepared to return home, Mira made a silent vow. Kale's sacrifice would not be forgotten. His story, and the story of his people, would live on, a testament to bravery and unity in the face of darkness. Victory at a cost. The battle was over, but the void of space felt heavier than ever. The flagship's destruction had scattered the Eater fleet, erasing the immediate threat. Yet the silence that followed carried the weight of countless sacrifices. Captain Mira Jones stood on the bridge of the Aurora, gazing at the debris field where Kale and the alien flagship had once been. Her crew worked quietly, subdued by the enormity of what had just transpired. "Lieutenant Carter," Mira said, her voice steady but weary. "Status report." Carter glanced at his console. "Shields are down to 15%. Hull integrity at 60%. We've got injuries across multiple decks, but the Eater drones have been neutralized. No more breaches." He paused. "Reinforcements are sweeping the area for survivors." Mira nodded. "Good. Prioritize medical aid and damage control. We'll recover what we can." Echoes of sacrifice. As the cleanup began, Mira found herself in the Aurora's observation deck, staring into the void. The memory of Cal's final words echoed in her mind. "Tell them our story." She gripped the railing, her thoughts heavy. They had won, but at what cost? Kale, his people, and the countless lives lost to the Eaters would never return. Yet their sacrifice had ensured the survival of her crew and the reinforcements. Their bravery had turned the tide. Her communicator buzzed. "Captain, this is O'Malley. You should come to the hangar. We've recovered something unusual." Mira's heart skipped. "On my way." A glimmer of hope. In the hangar, Mira found O'Malley and a group of engineers surrounding a damaged pod. It was alien in design, with cracks spidering across its translucent surface. Inside lay a figure, tall, slender, and unmistakably one of Cal's people. The being's chest rose and fell faintly, alive but unconscious. "We found this drifting near the debris field," O'Malley explained. "Looks like it was ejected from the flagship before the explosion. Life support's barely functional, but it's holding." Mira approached the pod, her hand resting gently on the cool surface. A surge of hope stirred within her. Kel's sacrifice had not been in vain. Perhaps his people were not entirely lost. "Get this pod to medical," she ordered. "Do everything you can to stabilize them." O'Malley nodded, and the engineers carefully moved the pod. Mira lingered for a moment, her mind racing. If one survivor had made it, could there be others? Could the remnants of Kel's people still be out there, scattered among the stars? The beginning of unity. Later, aboard the Vanguard, a council of surviving captains convened to discuss the aftermath. Admiral Lin presided over the meeting, her commanding presence filling the room. "The Eater threat has been neutralized, for now," Lin began. "But we must remain vigilant. Their destruction came at great cost, and we cannot afford." Mira stood to speak, her voice firm. "We owe our survival to the courage of Kale and his people. They faced the Eaters alone for who knows how long, and they paid the ultimate price to protect us. We have a responsibility to honor their sacrifice." Lin nodded. "Agreed. We'll initiate a full search of the region for any survivors. If Kel's people remain, we'll ensure they have our support." Mira's heart swelled with determination. The story of Kel's bravery would not end here. His legacy would become the foundation of a new alliance, a partnership forged in the fires of battle. The message. Back on the Aurora, Mira recorded a message to be transmitted across human space. She spoke directly into the camera, her words deliberate and heartfelt. "This is Captain Mira Jones of the exploration vessel Aurora. We have faced a great enemy, one that sought to destroy everything in its path. But in the darkest of times, we found allies in the most unexpected places. Kale and his people stood with us, sacrificing everything to stop the Eaters. Their story is one of courage, unity, and hope." She paused, her voice softening. "Let this be a lesson to us all. No matter how different we may seem, we are stronger together. And as we rebuild, let us honor their memory by ensuring such destruction never happens again." The message ended, and Mira leaned back in her chair, her mind at peace for the first time in days. The future. As the Aurora and the fleet prepared to leave the battlefield, the faint signal of the alien survivors' pod was sent to the Vanguard's medical team for further study. Admiral Lin assured Mira that they would do everything possible to help the alien recover. Weeks later, as the Aurora docked at a human space station for repairs, Mira received word from the Vanguard. The alien had woken, disoriented but alive. They identified themselves as Ayla, a member of Kel's people. Through Ayla, the story of Kel's species began to unfold. They had once been a thriving civilization, explorers and scientists who had encountered the Eaters long before humans did. Their fleet had been their last hope, a desperate attempt to escape annihilation. But even in their darkest hour, they had chosen to fight for survival and for others. The legacy. As Ayla worked with human leaders to rebuild and forge a new alliance, Mira stood aboard the repaired Aurora, ready to embark on her next mission. The scars of the battle remained, but so did the lessons. Kel's name became a symbol of unity, a rallying cry for cooperation across species. His story spread across human space, inspiring hope and reminding everyone of the power of sacrifice and redemption. Mira gazed out at the stars, a small smile on her lips. Kel's voice echoed in her mind. "Tell them our story."